Hello friends and welcome to the podcast. My name is Chris Grant and I'm Partnerships Manager here at Digital Construction Skills. And today I'm joined by Michelle Pretorius from EDMA Systems, and we're here to find out all about resource management and time and attendance software. You know, what is it used for and why construction businesses and SMEs would want to use it. So Michelle, I'm delighted to have you here, so you're very welcome. Hi, how you doing?
It's lovely to be here, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you some of my knowledge and experiences and the great features that our software can offer construction businesses and other SMEs.
Oh, it's great to have you here because I get so many questions about time and attendance software and what it is. So I'm just hoping you're going to hear and enlighten us all today. So Michelle, let's get straight into it then. So just begin briefly telling people, you know, who you are, what your role is, and a little bit of background of EDMA Systems as a company.
Yes, sure. Yes, as you've shared with everyone, I'm Michelle Pretorius. I'm the director of EDMA Systems UK. So the business started in South Africa by my sister, actually. And my role here is to grow the business in the UK. The business in South Africa, and obviously with my input, was created by a group of industry specialists. So we've got a combination of time and attendance, industrial relations, payroll, finance and HR, and software development all within the company. And it basically became increasingly apparent how most companies still rely on manual processes for human resource information as well as payroll. And it's really based on some of our payroll customers, we then went into developing the software to better support them and help them understand their business better. The idea behind it was really born out of the vision to create a real-time solution, and that removes the disconnect between departments and that silo effect that companies have. And essentially, obviously, all driven by the employee information within the system, moving into job costing and basically giving a really good understanding of your people, machinery and equipment costs within your organization. So that's kind of, you know, where it comes from and why. We have a team of about 25 people now that are the heart and brains behind the system. And I say heart because we're all passionate about giving our customers a system that really helps them see into their business in real time and not be looking at your reactive reporting, you know, after month end to say, oh, you know, we've overspent here, or we've had absenteeism trends throughout the month that we only identify a month later. And yes, in terms of the UK, we're looking to further grow the number this year, specifically in the UK, so that we'll have a full support base and a software development base in the UK itself. So currently we host our customer software in the UK, but a lot of my support team are based in South Africa. So I liaise with them, and then I've got a small base locally. And then for myself, just my background, I've had almost around 20 years experience in the field of manufacturing. I'm an accountant by trade for paying for my sins. So I was a finance and HR manager for a global specialty chemical company for about 16 years of that period. And I was involved in rolling out project solutions for the business, as well as just the usual finance and HR management function. So I know firsthand the pain points of managing different business processes and people and trying to provide better insight to give accurate results to senior management. So, you know, when we started talking about EDMA and what we could do to remove those pain points, I get very excited with that because in my past, I experienced, you know, the frustration of that, you know, chasing people for timesheets, understanding what's required to go into payroll, etc. And by having a system that actually updates that automatically, it eliminates so much sort of trivial admin tasks for teams within the organization. And yes, as I said, we help businesses to automate the routine admin tasks, and that gives them the opportunity for their staff to actually focus on more skills that are more effective to improve their business rather than just administrative stuff. You know, so it's not about a lot of people often think, oh, the minute you put in a system, are we going to be eliminating jobs? But it's not about that. I think it's just focusing on the right type of data, looking at trend analysis, and actually being able to work strategically to better manage the business going forward, rather than just punching in, data into a system.
Yes. But what? Just now, at the minute, just before we on the outset, can we just define what we mean exactly by the terms resource management and time and attendance? What do we mean by that?
Yes, well, resource management is the process for business owners or managers to plan, schedule, and allocate your business resources. And obviously, a key element and a major cost of any business is your individuals, so your employees as well as contractors, and their skills and technology. And to basically manage it in the best possible way to maximize your efficiency. Along with that, there would also be elements such as your machinery and equipment, etc. So all the resources that you need within your business, it's ideal to have a system that can plan and manage that effectively.
Okay. And then time and attendance, what would you...
Time and attendance, I think, as I mentioned to you before, it's funny how, when you mention that, people not really... sure what that covers. Essentially, it's the process of tracking hours worked for all your employees and your contractors, and again, for the hours utilized within your business for machinery and equipment, and to ensure that contracts are adhered to, people are paid correctly, and you can manage absenteeism, etc. in that respect. So that's the basis of time and attendance.
Great. Okay, that's good then. So, it may be an obvious question, but I need to ask it, Michelle. Why might a company need a software solution that helps with resource management and time and attendance? What problems does it solve?
Well, in my view, a software solution can track and monitor the work hours and attendance automatically. So straight away, you're not needing to have your employees or your admin staff manually, sort of logging that somewhere in a book, on a clipboard, or in a spreadsheet. So the solution can take away that burden on your staff. And then by doing so, the time that it's saved automatically saves you costs. And then there are other factors in terms of the accuracy of that solution. Tracking that time gives you a saving in costs as well, because it tracks up to the second clockings, whereas when people do a manual timesheet, you're generally rounding to the nearest 5 minutes or the nearest 10 minutes, etc. So essentially, your software will automate a lot of the processes. It creates accuracy because nobody's sitting there calculating it manually and putting in incorrect hours, etc. And in terms of the payroll staff as well, they can, or your HR staff, etc. They can also then help by using the system. They can monitor the attendance of staff, any late arrivals and early departures. You can also plan your leave on a system like that as well. So you've got forward thinking, and on a dashboard, you can actually see at a glance where all your staff are, and is everybody productive as they should be? Because at the end of the day, we employ people to be productive so that our business can make money.
Well, that's true, yeah. And then, Michelle, this gives you this real time type of thing then. So it's not just you're seeing it in real time. Is that am I getting that right? You're seeing the time and attendance more or less in real time. So it's not like the old way we would put timesheets in on a Friday, fax it through to somebody, and it was just like getting all that updated, and that was all manual process was updated, and then it was just a whole kind of remembering what you had to, where people were and what things were getting.
Exactly, trying to work out, even for the employees themselves, thinking, well, did I actually start at 8:05 or was it 8? Yes. So yes, the real time, I think, is a huge benefit. We actually had one of our clients in manufacturing loved the fact that so they have the biometric devices for the staff to enter their factories in the morning. Mm-hmm. And one of the managers, his comment to us once it was running is he said he could be sitting at home or in his office far away from the door, and he's just looking at his dashboard and he can see who's clocking in as they're clocking in, and he can see who's like 5 minutes late or 2 minutes late. He doesn't have to be at the door to see has everybody clocked in. So yes, it's literally, unless somebody drops connection, if they're in a bad area, and in that split second they drop connection, as soon as they sort of get connection again, it'll update immediately, but it will update at the correct time. It holds the data within the app. So yes, so that's where real time is fantastic. It removes the burden of the staff having to remember, when the hours that they worked at each job, as well as just that for management, they can see immediately who's late, who's left early, who's gone on a long break or a cigarette break. It definitely, I must admit, just on that, I often get the question, people are, well, why do we, in terms of, why do you not trust people? Why do you sort of want to have that big brother aspect of watching? But for me, and we'll probably go through it a bit later, but there's so many more benefits, and it shouldn't be viewed in that way. It's more about just ensuring efficiency, because our employee costs are, in any organization, are your biggest costs. It's your biggest asset. So you really need to manage it as effectively as possible and be able to pinpoint where there are issues. So if you have somebody that's continually going on a long break, you have data that you can address the issue, have a discussion with them a lot sooner than, a few weeks or months down the line. Yeah.
You can preempt it. You're seeing patterns. It might be, but you can spot things and spot trends. But that's really interesting. That whole Big Brother aspect is a really, really fascinating side of things. And my goodness, I mean, some people think this is probably the worst thing on earth that can happen. But I think generally, the nature of work's changing. I think that's maybe something we're going to touch on later on, maybe, Michelle.
Yeah.
But now, we kind of started to talk about the platform there. So maybe just take us through then the key features. You mentioned the real time there, obviously, already. I mean, what other key features is it? And how does it work, and what does the platform essentially do? Maybe take us through that then.
Okay, so what our platform provides is businesses that have like a fixed premises, so whether it's a factory or offices, we would supply biometric devices for staff to clock in. And then if they've got any mobile or remote teams, whether it's staff working at home or always out at customers, our mobile app they can use to clock in. So there's two mechanisms.
Okay.
And then essentially the software, you can do your scheduling and your leave planning for staff. So you can actually schedule people to shifts or different jobs or leave. You can do it daily. You can do it, 3 times a day if you choose, or if anything changes. Or you could do it up to a year in advance, whatever's suitable for the type of business. It also gives you the ability to adapt faster. So if you needed to change that because somebody's sick, etc., you can do it literally at the click of a button. Okay. We've got mobile apps. So our job costing app allows staff that are, like in construction, they would clock in when they get to their customer site, and when they leave, clock out, and that as they're clocking, it's automatically updating the job project cost reports as well as their timesheets. So straight away the business is getting a clear view of where the employees worked, and also time spent on travel versus productive hours on the site. Right. And then we've got, in terms of the job costing area on the module, as I said, allows businesses to load all their jobs. They're geolocated. So on your dashboard, you have a view of where all your staff are and how long they've been at that particular job, etc. So it definitely gives you a nice real-time view of everybody's situation, and it helps in terms of if customers are following up where your staff are, at a glance, because you can see on the dashboard. Then it generates the timesheets, as I mentioned, and that gives you a payroll export file that can go into any payroll system, because we format it to whatever your system requires. And in terms of the apps, there's the job cards that the employees can not only clock in and out of the jobs, but if there's any kind of note they need to put in or sign off on there, they can do that on the phone as well. And I say phone, but it works on iPad or Android tablets as well.
So do you mean there, Michelle? So for example, one of the things that we would I'm thinking in old money here some ways on site, we'd find a thing called like an allocation sheet, and it was always usually had a description of the labour, maybe the plant and the materials that they used, and you would write that in manually. hours you spent on a particular task, and then that would go to a job code and all the rest of it. So is that digitalized? Does it give you that level of detail? Can you map it to like effectively a job task? Does it get?
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we set up the jobs within the system for the customer, they would say, well, these are the codes, this is the format we want so that it matches with the accounting system. And, that's what each task element is, etc. So that's all done at the outset. So when the user's clocking, they just select that relevant job code and any particular task code. So then it automatically allocates the time and his rate as well. If he's using a particular specialized skill for that job, it will automatically see that, it's that person on that job and that's the task. So his whatever's been loaded as a special skills rate would be charged instead of possibly like a travel rate, So there's all those rules we would set up in the background. So when the user's using it, it's really easy. It's red and green buttons in and out, selecting it. So so essentially it digitizes that cost allocation sheet.
That used to be my job.
Saves a lot of time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes. Well, listen, Michelle, that used to be my job when I was working for a big contractor back in the past. It was my job on a Friday, getting all the allocation sheets up and getting all the codes and matching all the codes, and you give it to the office manager, or give it to the QS, and so that sounds like this kind of process is kind of just getting really simplified and automated.
So essentially with that, the setup, when you configure it, there would be time spent with management to say, okay, so what is your structure of your jobs?
Yes,
how do you want it? We would do all that at the start so that then once they start using it, it's such a simple flow of tasks for the employees and the users that are using it. Yeah.
And maybe we'll come on to that later on about setting the system up. I take it, it's just a wee bit of forethought and a wee bit of thinking up front about how you set the system up, and then it might be a wee bit of pain you need to go through around that, but maybe we'll come on to that maybe later on, just about that part of it. But it's brilliant.
And then another element of it that I always love to share with people is that you can manage your employee certifications and your equipment sort of licensing on the system as well. So against each employee record, you can load their like CSCS cards, and any other certifications, any first aid, any machinery permits, etc. And then set notification periods. So you could get like a 30-day or 60-day notification to say this person's permit is going to expire on such and such a date. So that way you can plan renewals or training to ensure that there's no risk from a health and safety perspective that somebody's operating machinery and their permit's expired, etc. And likewise, you can set MOT reminders for vehicles, or we've got one client that's rope access, and so their ropes have to be tested every so many hours. So those sorts of things can all be managed on the system, which I think that's really great, because coming from an organization where often you had to now go and dig in a filing cabinet to see when something was going to be renewing and make sure somebody's remembered to put it in a calendar, etc. It just eliminates all those sorts of manual reminders to ourselves. So yes, that can be managed quite easily on the system. And in terms of planning, if you're scheduling a job to somebody, if their permit is due to, or certification is going to expire in the period that you are trying to schedule them to a particular job where that would be needed, it would also give a warning, just so that you're not planning somebody on a job that technically they may have an expired certification. So it definitely improves all your scheduling and optimizing shifts and that with staff, which is really great.
No, that is really good, because particularly in construction sites, there's so many things, inspections and reminders and things that you site managers and construction ops based people on site, that it can be hard to keep up with at times. So anything that automates this and actually just sets reminders, is only a good thing, I think. So Michelle, is it modularized? So you were talking it sounded like a little bit there that there's like resource management and there's time and attendance. Are they? I know they're interoperable, obviously, in the system, but can you use them as like standalone solutions? Is it modularized, the system, if you know what I mean?
It is, in a sense. How it works is, so our base modules, you would always have your human resources module with others, because your employee records and your rates and all those sorts of things are maintained within there. So essentially, your most basic one would be your human resources and time and attendance. And then, as an example, if you were a restaurant, you would have your employee records there, and they would be clocking at a biometric device, and their timesheets would be updated, and they wouldn't really need much else. However, for the likes of like construction, who would be using job costing, etc., then the package there would be the modules of HR, time and attendance, and job costing would make sense. And ultimately, when we roll out our health and safety, they don't have to get it, but they could get it because that would remove the manual site files and toolbox talks, because we're digitizing all that. But again, it's not, you can't, you don't need to have it. It just, we think it'll be a huge benefit for businesses. But yeah, so in construction, I would say your package that you would look at is your HR, time and attendance, and job costing. And then the likes of like retail and all that, they wouldn't need the job costing. So, and then we've also got the other thing, apart from health and safety module, the other one that's coming out will be your stores. So you can manage stores within the system as well, the consumables and that. So again, those will be all added benefits if people want to take those modules on. But yes, they can certainly operate without them as well.
Great. Brilliant then. Michelle, so is it quite simple then? So you're just talking about like for any op can get this on their phone or on a tablet, and it's fairly intuitive, fairly straightforward. Clock in, clock out. You say biometric there. Do you maybe want to just tell people what biometric actually is? What do you mean by that?
So we have biometric scanners. So you can either go for a fingerprint scanner for people to clock in. So we would scan like 4 fingers, and then they could use either, but you only need 1 finger to scan to get in. We also then have facial recognition scanners as well. So it picks up, and to be honest, the facial recognition is fantastic, how accurate it is, and from a distance, how quickly it picks up the iris. And so it's really great that for where there's a high volume of people, like in office blocks, and if the access control is controlled by that, because then it opens the gates immediately for them. So yes, it uses biometrics rather than cards, as a lot of other systems use. We do have some devices that you can use cards as well, but our view is the biometrics are the most accurate because historically, or I've heard a lot of situations where people can share cards. You can say, please let me in, I've forgotten my card at home, or I've had the card damaged. Whereas, you can't share fingers and irises. So the biometrics is definitely the most accurate, and it also picks up the way the algorithm works, in that you can't use like a false latex fingerprint or anything. It
like
picks up a pulse and all that. Yes. So we use and of course during the pandemic, the facial recognitions really took off, because also some of the devices can do the temperature reading as well. So it has a nice combination of that if businesses don't want to have any form of touching a device. So so that's the biometrics.
So, well, that kind of leads on nicely to the next question. And you were just talking about the pandemic. Obviously, that's we're still just coming at the back end at the time of recording this just now. But what does change for companies that adopt this solution? And what becomes possible for them? Maybe give us a few examples around that.
Okay. In general, so maybe not specific to the pandemic, but in general, businesses would have all their employee and contractor information maintained and stored in the cloud, which I know I've also had some people say, this cloud talk is confusing and scary, but essentially it's hosted in the cloud, so it's safe and secure, and it doesn't require a device on any site. So it definitely allows access for those that need access. So it's far more flexible for any business. And in terms of specifically, just thinking around the pandemic, it gives so much more flexibility for businesses to manage staff that are remote, rather than, I've had inquiries from people in industries that you wouldn't really think they'd want it. I mean, things like estate agents, etc., where suddenly their whole team is based at home, and then the business owners felt they were wasting time constantly finding out what time did you start today, what time have you gone to properties, etc., etc. So the whole work from home scenario, I think, has created a big shift in the way people think and the way they operate. And that's definitely been a benefit if they've had a system that they can rely on. Because also then, the business owner could be at home, but he can see on he or she can see on their dashboard, oh, okay, everybody's clocked in. They're all at the different clients that they need. You don't even have to really worry about rushing off to a site to check on anybody.
Yes, absolutely.
So, as much as we don't like to feel that we should be checking on anybody, there's enough. I always do believe the people that go the extra mile, that do what they're meant to, won't complain about putting a system in. The ones that may push the boundaries and could be problematic are the ones that may complain, and this will help rein them in.
Well, that's it. But I guess with this great power comes a bit of maybe thinking about how you use this solution as a manager and using it with the. It's not necessarily a stick to beat people around the head. It should be
exactly.
We talked about earlier. It's monitoring trends. There might be reasons for these absences, or there might be something.
And I think that's the thing. It definitely helps you identify things a lot quicker.
Sure.
And support. Both recognizing staff for going the extra mile and doing the extra stuff, rather than it just being left to a manager or supervisor to relay that information to management. You've got the support data right there to do that. And then just going back on a few other examples, because of the accurate clocking, when if businesses take on a system like that, as we said before, it just eliminates a lot of time wastage for the relevant people in all those processes. And I think, again, with the pandemic, businesses have had a significant impact. So I have noticed already in the last few weeks, probably since around December, how a lot of businesses are already thinking for the new year, they're back to business, but they do want to see how can they do things better? How can they improve stuff? Because they don't want to just have, unnecessary wastage of time and lost hours, etc. Sure. So I think that's where what can change for them. And probably the biggest challenge is just the mindset and the communication of that change, really.
Well, that's it. I mean, every single person that comes on speak to Michelle, it's process and culture. People and culture, should I say. People and culture is the main sort of stumbling blocks, I think, that they find when they're implementing these solutions. So maybe, Michelle, come on, just to actually maybe that part, come on to that kind of thing now, is the setup and the onboarding. How long does it take to get set up, and what are the key things you need from any potential contractors? So we're in construction here just now, in the construction space. What do you need from them, to actually get this thing set up and on board? You get on board with them, if you like. You maybe take us through how you support them.
So we have an Excel setup template where there's relevant tabs related to each section that we would need to load and create rules, etc., in the system. So what we do is I would sit with the people that are involved in that process. So sometimes it's the business owner, sometimes it could actually be somebody involved in payroll or the cost, like the QS, etc., for example. And then I would just work through with them, understanding the key things are their payroll information at the start, to understand all the earning codes and the file formats that we request certain information from their payroll, whether it's an agent or if it's somebody in-house, just to get some of that data. Obviously, for the template, I do need all the employee data. And then the key thing is understanding their shifts and how the business operates. So as an example, do they have weekly payrolls? Do they have staff that are on 40-hour week? Or is there a night shift or a certain pattern of like a 3-day or 4-day on type of thing? So I discuss all that with them to really understand exactly, because basically the system needs to mirror what's happening practically. And then from that, once I know what their different shift hours are, and we create the shift rules, And then the other thing that I need to get from them is the list of open jobs that they have, and the critical information is their job codes. The system, some of our clients have just created job codes that EDMA generates that we say, well, we can. But ideally, I always say to them, it's best if you've got a certain code that you're getting for your accounting system, you want EDMA to have the same. Otherwise, you don't want to have to worry about any rework, because ultimately the project cost report should just be an import directly in the right format that you want. So so I get the open job codes, the geolocation of that, and the time frame of that job, so that we can set it up in the system and any tasks related to it, etc. So those are the key elements, so that at the start we're setting up everything. So it's not a case of them getting the system and now they've got to load all their data, because that's the worst. People just don't want to do that. So we do all that, which the great thing is, in my discussions to and from doing this, is I get to understand their business really well. And then I can also suggest, based on experiences I've had with other customers, like, well, have you thought about doing it this way? Would that work better? That sort of thing. And then we also load all the rates. So we can load charge out rates. You don't have to, but you can load charge out rates for your staff and equipment. And then obviously their wage rates that they are costing you, because obviously you want to understand what that real cost is. And those sorts of things don't necessarily have to all be at day one when I get the setup template. There's certain elements that I have to have just to get going, and then the rest we can build on over the next couple of weeks. And once we've got that and we're happy that it's ready to implement and we've got everything set up, I then do the training for all the end users. And I can do it, well, the beauty of having software in the cloud, I can do all the training online. And it's easy enough to do that. But where I can do it in person, I always prefer it, especially if you've got a staff group that maybe have been working in the organization for a long time and now this is a big change for them. I think personal engagement is really important to get them embracing that change. So, and then what we do is part of the whole setup, costs, and that is including the training, etc. I train the end users for the clocking in, and then I phase in a couple of weeks after that the training for the staff that will run the timesheets and edit, because once we've got some data in there, we find it's better that they are trained on their own data rather than me showing them, it means more to them. And then I do training sessions with the payroll team and any project cost teams that need to look at the data. And then, what I normally do is once they've implemented and they've had training, I, in the background, check everything anyway. So if I've had some staff clocking and they've missed a clocking, I'll then, because I create like a WhatsApp group, so if anybody's got any concerns, we sort of communicate that way as well. And then I just really sort of guide the admin team through that whole process with the first pay run on the system, and any other assistance they need, whether it's daily or weekly beyond that. We're there for them. We've got 24/7 desktop support if anybody needs anything. But having said that, yes, what I've said to clients as well is if we do end user training and then 2 weeks later somebody says, I can't remember this section that you told me, then I run through it again and I'll send them some screen recordings, because sometimes I've found people, if they're following a screen recording, it helps. Well, it's nice to refer to rather than a booklet. So we've got various means of how they can actually keep that training alive for them. And yes, just really going back and forth until they actually say they're fully comfortable and I can let them go.
Well, that's and Michelle, then ultimately, then you're looking to make people self-sufficient in this. You're not.
Yes.
So there is a bit of, probably, as I say, that pain element to go through of actually thinking about all my systems, and then having to take it from where it is just now, but getting onto this system is probably, I'd imagine, the setup part could be probably the bit that people go, oh God, but once you get beyond that and you're getting familiar with the system and you're still there in the background to offer that support beyond that anyway, But the whole idea is that people will
Yes.
find the real benefit then. So it's just worth persevering, because I think that's kind of maybe coming on to my next question as well. You know, because I think a lot of the part of this project that we're involved with is aiming to try and demystify a lot of these digital tools, particularly for the SME sector of construction, them smaller business, 50 to maybe like to 250 type, 400 people businesses who just maybe don't have quite that digital capability like the tier ones do. And I think a lot of them still maybe they just think, they may get a bit confused by either marketing or they just maybe have went and done a digital tool in the past and it hasn't quite worked out for them for one reason or other. So and they've not realised the full benefits of it. So so what are the typical challenges then? I kind of maybe hinted them in the last question there. What are the typical challenges a company might face internally, and how do they overcome these hurdles when they're implementing like your solution?
Well, and I think I mentioned just when we were chatting earlier is that I think for me, getting the staff to embrace the change, well, in fact, management and staff to embrace the change, because I guess the key thing is having business owners to see the benefit. So once that's been addressed, then it's actually ensuring that whole change process is a positive process for staff, because I think that is the biggest challenge. And I would say, and I think it is just human nature. It's the fear that's created because it's an unknown entity that they've now got to worry about. And I've had a lot of people say, why fix what ain't broke? And
absolutely.
And it makes absolute sense. And I think when they're worried about their day-to-day, just getting their core business done, to have to worry about, this new system, I know it'll be good, but do I really have time for it? I think that's the biggest challenge for them. Sure. Which is where we see ourselves as the big benefit that we give our customers. It's not like they're buying something off the shelf. We take that pain away right at the beginning. I do need to sit with them to understand what they need out of the system, and how their business operates in terms of shifts and the type of work, etc. But we're then spending the hours loading and seeing if those shifts make sense, etc. So it's not like they're going to get something off the shelf that may be cheaper in the long run, at the outset, but then it's up to them to try and actually figure that out and get it loaded. And I think that's where people lose faith in changing to digital. So whereas now we test it, we make sure that we set up a user that we can test sort of on our testing platform using their shifts, everything like that, so we can see that the costs and everything that come out of it makes sense. So by the time they use it, it's really straightforward. And I think, the other thing that's really important is the data, and that can also often create an obstacle, is the data you put in needs to be good. So it needs to be clean data. I mean, I've had examples where customers, given me employee data, but they haven't really checked to see. And sometimes it's, the shifts that they're really using at the moment don't fit what they've said on the paper. There's staff that they've actually loaded that don't need to be loaded anymore because they've since left. And it's not impossible, but it just means, it just creates a little bit more work now. They've got to actually do the terminations of all that. So I think the important thing is at the outset is getting the data and the requirements correct makes the process that much easier. And that's why sometimes I may be talking to somebody every other day and saying, but you've said this, but so if I translate that into what that will mean on your timesheet, is that what you're expecting? And only when they actually see the practical outcome of maybe how they've explained something, do they realize, okay, yes, now that makes sense. So it is amazing how something at the start may seem so straightforward. I mean, and the other thing is, I've had scenarios where one of my engineering clients, the management filled out the template, said, these are the shifts we have, this is what we need, etc. When I was doing training with the end users, they were like, oh, but what about this scenario when that happens? What do we do then? And we had to do some tweaks on the software to accommodate that. So that's where it is important that there's good communication between the people on the ground using it and the people in payroll and that. So those are, I would say, probably the most important things, because if you can eliminate or at least be aware of that and deal with it correctly at the start, it takes a lot of pain away for
in the
the
long
end
run.
users.
Yes.
And probably the other thing is for them to stick to the plan. One of my clients had they had a fairly big size staff complement overall. It was also around, I think it was around 400 or whatever, but 100 or so are all remote. So they wanted to phase them in first. And the plan was, generally what we do is we would, once they're trained, if their pay period is, so if they're weekly paid staff, we would let them do 2 weeks parallel to their current manual system, so that when the people in payroll are looking at their paper timesheets, they can test and validate the data on the system and then be happy and say, right, we're cutting over, eliminate your paper timesheets. We've had situations where the clients, they've had certain pockets of staff that have not been happy about the change, so they've let them carry on with the old process. And of course, it's really extended the pain, because now you've got the people that are doing it, they're trying to learn the new system to get everybody on, running correctly, but they're also managing these ones that are, so they're not seeing the full benefit at the outset of the time saving. So those are one of the things that I've really learned, is to say to a company, if this is your time frame that you want to roll it out, we have to be firm with staff to stick to it, and we have to make sure there's clear communication on why it's important, and then then at least they're seeing the benefit, and you're not having staff saying, well, why is he doing a paper timesheet still and I've had to change it? And you could just create so many unnecessary painful situations.
I can just picture it. I totally can just picture what that scenario. And maybe that's that whole thing of maybe just a bit of extra coaching or something that is better time well spent up front, doing that and coaching them and actually understanding what are the real barriers, because it might just be something that's just in their head that they think they just can't get beyond. And you're right. I think you make that clean. You've got to make that clean break, isn't it? Because
part of what I do, what I make sure when I do the training of the end users, even if they're not using, the website where they're seeing the timesheets, ultimately they're just clocking on their phones. But I explain to them why the company's using it, why it benefits them, saves them 3 hours on a Sunday night thinking, what did they do for the last week, so they can submit their timesheet, and knowing that their pay is accurate. They don't have to have payroll chasing the supervisor to check because there was an error in the adding. There are lots of little things like that. So I make them quite aware of that as well, so that they don't walk away thinking, it's just a sort of monitoring exercise, as opposed to there's benefits for the employee as well as the company. And for the company, the key benefit really is they just want to eliminate unnecessary admin tasks and help each department be as efficient as they can. I mean, that's the real reason and the real purpose for it, rather than it being anything about tracking in the sense of wanting to know where everybody is from a negative aspect, So I think that's where, if they're communicated and they feel like, okay, there's some contribution that's valued from them as well, it definitely breaks down that sort of fear that they have of this change. So yeah,
absolutely. No, definitely. That's you're just hitting pushing all the right buttons in terms of all the things that you're saying there. That these are the common themes through any software adoption. What you're saying there, and it's just good to hear how you're dealing with it as a vendor, from a vendor's point of view, and again, it's just good as well just to understand your frustrations as well. Because I think as well, I think some people just think, well, I'm investing in this software, so you go and solve all my problems. There is that two-way thing of you've got to come prepared, and you've got to think about how this is you're going to use the tool. So, but listen, that's maybe we've got just a couple more questions, Michelle, for you.
No problem.
But what are the key things then a business should consider if they're really serious about adopting a resource management or a time and attendance software solution such as EDMA? What are the key things?
I think, I generally will say to people, in the sense of, are they thinking strategically for their business? How can I find additional cost savings in my business without just sort of cutting out services, etc.? It's looking at it as investing in something that actually has a return for you ultimately. So streamlining your processes is key. How can a business manage their teams remotely and easily and reduce absenteeism? So thinking along those terms leads to, well, it makes absolute sense to have a system that can take those pains away, that I can focus, as the business owner, can focus on the business in terms of what we want to achieve, whether we're builders or engineers, etc. Managing on-site attendance is key in terms of health and safety. You can do roll calls, etc. So things like that, making sure from a health and safety perspective, the business understands where their staff are, etc. That's a key element to consider in favor of having a system that can help with that. And are the business owners struggling to plan and schedule leave, something as simple as leave, where as soon as their business is growing and they've got 10 plus employees, and now they're trying to work out, everybody's sending in a leave request and there's overlaps, having a system that actually can plan that, and you can see well in advance, oh yes, that area, that team, they've already got 50% of the team on leave, so we need to. So there's all those sorts of things that can impact on your productivity and your project completions, and ultimately, yes, how can I improve productivity that I can complete my projects and make sure my pricing to my customer is profitable, so that my business can be profitable rather than running. Because obviously, as it is in construction, you're already affected by if there's adverse weather conditions. Yeah. So you don't really want to have unnecessary time delays just because, one of the things that we helped a client sort of identify and see at a glance was the fact that their engineers don't start their day at the office. They all start from home and go directly to the customers. So they're all assigned whatever jobs. But once they started using the system, they realized that they had some guys that were located closer to some customers that they were sending somebody else to. So they were incurring longer time traveling, less time on site. And they then reorganize them. And obviously, sometimes, depending on the skill, you still have to do it that way. But the majority, they could actually reorganize so that logistically, they had guys on site for longer hours than just driving. So it's things like that that I think are really key for businesses to be able to see and identify. And I think only when you actually see it in the metrics does it really impact you,
Sure. And that's becoming more important now that, when we're like carbon counting and all the things like that in terms of, the carbon footprint of companies as well, and thinking about resource management and task management is going to be more critical. It's going to make more sense, isn't it? And again, you're proving that and you're seeing that, and I can see that. It's that
so hopefully that answered your question in a sense.
Definitely. These are things I think that there's two key things aside of all the HR stuff we talked about is the building safety bill. And all the health and safety kind of extra responsibilities is going to emerge in the UK particularly, and the additional responsibilities is going to come on. That's going to transform the health and safety element, and you're going to have to have this golden thread, a digital record of health and safety information, and be able to prove that, as well as this green thread, if you like, of showing environmental data and how your workforce and how you're managing that. So I can see that being a thing that's going to be. Everyone's going to have to do some sort of monitoring on this at some level, no matter what level you're going to be at. So I can see these are other things maybe beyond the obvious ones that you've pointed out there, Michelle. But I can see these are people for the workforce of the future. We need to be thinking about that, and that's exactly what was going on. My second last question here was, more broadly speaking, what might happen if we have solutions like this, or one like this more widely adopted. And we have a lot more granular data on the world of work and working patterns. Do you think it can transform how we think about work and workforce planning and construction?
Yes, I think absolutely. To gain that real-time insight into the business operations and understanding it, sort of managing budgets proactively and project completions, it can just give you so much insight that you can actually change the way the planning is done and be that much more efficient, which means ultimately you could be that much more competitive because pricing could be adjusted. There's so many positives that could come out of it. In terms of scheduling teams, there's optimization there. So unnecessary overtime costs can be cut because you're actually seeing it at the outset when you're planning to say, because our schedule planner, what it does is you can schedule people to the job, but it already calculates, well, based on his timesheet to date, he would be going into overtime if he goes onto that job for X amount of hours, and then it shows it up. So it definitely gives you that insight rather than after the fact looking and going, oof, we've used the overtime budget more than we anticipated, and now we have to try and reorganize for the next pay period. So things like that, I think having that data at your fingertips in real time just is amazing for businesses, because you can ultimately be more profitable and be that much more competitive. That is my view. And I think in terms of the accuracy just is so much better because of the time tracking of productive hours. Businesses are more accurate. I think you can manage people's work-life balance that much better. So there's the benefit for the employees, which I think is really key. And they're talking now with all the view of having 4-day weeks for different industries, etc. And I think if businesses can have that view and be more productive, then there's more possibility of having that flexibility in certain areas. I mean, obviously there's a certain impact in terms of costs, etc. But I think if you've got that insight and that data at hand, you can actually be such a strong competitor in the construction industry or any industry that you're in against your fellow businesses.
It's that confidence that can give you. I think we're having that data and being able to monitor patterns must be really, really invaluable insights. So, Michelle, this has been really, really, really interesting, and just to get a bit of a deep dive in this. So, I'm really thanks for your time today. And just before we go, then, so what should people do next if they want to come and find out more about EDMA? What should they do?
Well, they could visit our website, which is edmasystems.co.uk. I can drop it to you anyway if you want to put it out.
Yeah, I'll stick it on. I'll stick it on the page as well. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And or they can email me at michelle@edmasystems.co.uk, and otherwise contact me on my mobile phone, which I'm happy to give out, 078-5299-5226. And I'm happy to have a chat. I'm very passionate about it, and I think it's because as finance and HR manager, I was the one that had to make my team, we spent many hours just because of manual processes and having to automate that kind of stuff. I know the value of it on my team as well as myself as management in terms of relaying that sort of data across to senior management and global organizations. So for me, I just think there's no doubt about the need for these types of products out in the market. And I think the biggest challenge is for businesses just to make the decision to do it and to manage that change process. Because once they've done it, it just makes such a difference. I mean, one of my customers knocked the payroll process alone from 5 days down to 3 days. I had another customer that saves 3 hours a day in their weekly pay run and 18 hours a week in their project cost reporting process just from not having to manually capture. And those are just a few little examples, So I love to hear feedback from my clients that they're seeing the benefits in time, even, let alone when we look at what that value translates to. So yes, I'd love to hear from people if they've got any questions or just want to chat around, even their concerns about it. Yes, please contact me. That's great.
Well, Michelle, it's been a pleasure to talk to you and catch up with you again. And thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate that now, Michelle. So thanks very much now.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. Okay. Yes, it's been lovely being here. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.